Yes, so we are all set, and uh, I think it's our privilege to have Ms. Bindya Shajit here today with us for the session on inclusion into classrooms. So thank you once again for coming and being with us. So, Dr. Bindya Shajit has got her doctoral degree from North Carolina State University in USA in 2012. She has started her journey with bachelor's degree in psychology in Mahatma Gandhi University in Kerala, followed by her master's degree in special education from NC State again North Carolina in 2004. She's also done her diploma on child rights law from the National Law School of India in Bangalore. So she's worked with, I can see several, I can actually say a spectrum of children with different difficulties for around 13 years. She's been working with children and adolescents. She is currently the only certified professional in India in collaborative and proactive solutions and evidence based approach towards working with children and adolescents with behavior difficulties. See, she is also a TEACH certified advanced consultant, and she provides consultative services in Bangalore and supports families, schools, and other organizations that facilitate inclusion. In addition to working with children directly, she is also involved with training parents and teachers. She also works as a part-time lecturer in Department of Psychology at Mount Carmel College, and she's also worked as a member of Karnataka Child Welfare Committee in Bangalore Urban District and helps Karnataka Police in interviewing child victims of sexual abuse. She is also one of the founder directors of All Inclusive Foundation Bangalore. So, thank you and welcome. And over to you, Ms. Bindya, for the session. So, anybody has any queries, you can put it up in the chat box. We will take it up as and when. In the end, you can even raise your hands, unmute, and talk. So, right now, over to Dr. Bindya.
Thank you, Ms. Gauri. Thank you so much for having me here. Um, I know one of the things that I don't like much about an online um, presentation is the lack of interaction. If you are okay with switching on your cameras, I would really appreciate that. You're also welcome to unmute and ask me questions during the session. I don't have a problem with that. And I'll be happy to take questions after the session for sure, but you're welcome to interrupt me if there are any questions bothering you at that time. So, so I usually start off the session with a little bit of interaction. I will pose the question. I'll see if there is somebody who is interested in responding to the question. Today we're going to be talking about neurodiversity, as you all know, and I am a I'm a very passionate advocate of inclusion and children's rights. So I try my best to make that possible. I've worked with mainstream schools to consult for them and make facilitate inclusion to happen in the right way in those schools. So I've seen a lot of different ways in which inclusion has been done. I have seen ways in which inclusion has not effectively been implemented. I have been I've been part of I've been part of running special schools and worked with mainstream schools to to facilitate inclusion. So whatever today I'm sharing are the lessons that I have learned mostly from my work with children and families. Um, so what we'll do today is before we start off with our session, I want to understand what is your knowledge, what is your current knowledge or awareness about neurodiversity? What do you understand from the word neurodiversity?
So, you can message or you can even unmute and talk.
Ms. Gauri, if you don't mind reading out whatever messages come in the chat, because I may
Definitely,
not
I
be
can
able
do
to
that.
keep track. Thank you
No
so much.
problem. I will do that. So, can we start off with, yeah, children whose development is not typical?
Okay, so that is neurodiversity to you. Okay. And what do you mean when you say that? What do you
Miss
mean by
Pratyusha,
children whose
do
development
you
is
want to
not?
unmute and say what do you kind of mean by which is not typical? Anything? I think this is about understanding what we all have various views on this. So,
Right.
just about
There is no
opening up
right
and
and wrong answer. Yeah.
understanding.
Yeah.
So,
It's not a
hi,
right and
I'm
wrong answer.
Milu. I am Milu. I'm therapist, physiotherapist. So I have a therapy center. So I am dealing with more of neurodivergent children. So it is a very vast. I can say it is very difficult to describe because they have lots of issues in their domains. Like especially now, I can see because communication is a problem, social skills is a problem more than cognitive skill because now parents are concentrating more on cognitive skills. But as from my experience, what I see is the kids are not able to express when you see other children, and they have lots of other problems because of this communication issues. They are facing social skills also is a big problem. So it is very difficult to explain what is neurodivergent because all the domains it is and all the children are unique. So
Right. So we are not
yeah,
even talking about neurodivergent yet. We are talking about neurodiversity. And I
okay.
understand. So you're coming from the perspective where you're seeing a lot of these concerns, which is probably different from a typically developing child, right, Miss Manu?
Yes, yes.
Yeah. Anybody else want to add to that?
So, Surya is saying children who are having disabilities. Then again, Pratyusha is explaining children who are not attaining age appropriate milestones in any of the five domains, behaviors, etc.
Ma'am, may I add
Please,
something?
please.
Yeah, according to me, just like we all look different and our skin color is different, our other physical features are different, neurodiversity means that every child can think and cognitively develop differently. So it is a matter of us accepting that not every child is at the same cognitive level.
Right. Okay. Okay. So you're saying there are cognitive differences is what neurodiversity means to you. Okay.
Basically, the development of the brain functions, kind of.
Okay. Any other? So this is like, one of those, we talk about how the blind man went to see the elephant, right? And that is what I want here also, because everybody will have a different perspective. And when we all talk about it, it'll come together. And, whatever I have to say will come from the audience only. So that is what I'm waiting for. So whatever even if it is, a small fact about neurodiversity, please feel free to share.
Hello, ma'am. Good evening. I'm Shailaja.
Good evening.
It could be related to the developmental lagging, which can reflect in the child's academics also, where teachers might not be regularly trained to identify and intervene for the uh, actual need and help. So this workshop can help us, I believe, ma'am, to
That's awesome.
help the
That's
child
awesome.
understand the content first and then help the children in the school.
Got it. But what does neurodiversity mean to you?
It related to something exactly. I'm not able to explain the terminology related to brain development process where little lacking or delay in milestones, which could relate to the child's behavior and cognitive skill, development of cognitive skill or anything social, behavioral, or speech. It
Got
could
it.
relate to that. I have understood that way.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Shailaja.
Thank
There's
you.
another interesting comment as it's a part of human evolution.
Okay.
And
All right. But
Nidhi mentions each and everyone is neurodivergent because of different thinking and behavior.
got it. Okay. Okay. All right. Joseph?
For me, neurodiversity basically is like it just encompasses the term ki everyone has different needs, and that's how we function. So there's no, like, everyone is different in their own way, and everyone's brain works in their own, like, different, the capacity of wanting something can be different for everyone, and that's different in how they show as well. So yeah, I think I kind of agree on someone saying that everyone is kind of neurodivergent itself. It's
Right,
just,
right,
yeah,
right.
when if someone is seen out of the spectrum or too extreme of the spectrum, then we kind of label it, which is kind of not the
Hmm.
point sometimes.
Hmm. Yeah,
We like generalize it that okay, they are neurodivergent and we are not. But we might
interesting.
just be masking it. We are
Right,
not
right.
sure.
You're
Yeah.
you're using some big words there, Joshil, and I'm glad you're using it because that'll help me segue into whatever it is that I want to go into next. So you and somebody else also talked about how everybody's probably neurodivergent, right? Everybody, because somebody said it's a cognitive diversity, which means everybody's brains are different, so everybody should be part of this. Everybody's different from each other. Then why is it that we are having difficulties with just a subset of these, people, um, who we are, identifying, and then talking about including them in classrooms. And then once they're included in the classrooms, we are struggling a lot. Not just in our classrooms, in the community also, these people are struggling. So where is that coming from? What is that? What do you have to say about that?
Anybody, any views?
I think it comes down to understanding what how one regulates in classes or even in the public. And again, like everyone has different ways of regulating, and we have just grown up to learn that there are only certain ways to regulate. There are no other ways because that's what is conditioned.
Right, right. Okay, so you have a point there. Um, so we are conditioned to behave a certain way, which means there is a set of social norms. When I say social norms, it is not just I'm not just talking about specifically social norms. It would include our educational expectations, um, our behavioral expectations, cultural expectations. All of that will come under the social norms that I'm talking about. So there are these social norms that we are expected to comply with, right? Um, and we see that there's a subset of people now, even when we say we are all part of the neurodiversity spectrum, which we are, because we all have different ways of thinking, we all have different ways of learning, we have different ways of perceiving what's going on around us, we have different ways of behaving, we have different ways of responding, reacting. So we all do that differently. No two of us in this meeting, where we have like what, 55 people, no two of us in this meeting would respond to a same situation same way, because we are all wired different. So that is what is referred to as neurodiversity, right? Everybody comes in that spectrum. Now we also have words like neurotypical and neurodivergent, right? Now where do those words come from? What do you mean by neurotypical, right? We sometimes say, we are that group, and the other people who are not like us are the neurodivergent. So this typicality, or the norm, or what we call normal, has been established by some social expectation or social norming or whatever. This has been established, and whoever fits into those norms are considered neurotypical. Whoever are deviating away from those norms are probably considered neurodivergent. Now, I don't know how many of you are familiar with the medical model, right? And I'm guessing there might be a lot of doctors who are part of the Brainchild Trust as well. So how the medical model looks at it is very, um, how do you say? So you look at it from a very normative perspective, right? So say for example, I have a fever, I go to the doctor, the first thing the doctor does is check my fever. So they're assessing to find out what is happening right now. And they compare it to the baseline, right? So I have 104 fever when my fever should be at 97 or 98 or whatever. And now I have this difference because now I have deviated from the norm, which means I have to do something to bring it back to the norm, right? So if you look at any medical intervention, that is the rationale behind it. Whenever there is a deviation from the norm, we try and intervene to bring it back to norm. So this is the medical model, right? And this is how we approach neurodevelopmental conditions. Mental health conditions are also approached the same way. So when you look at it from a medical model, you look at somebody's behavior, you think, okay, this behavior is not correct, or this behavior is not normal, and this is not the behavior we want. So can we do something to make sure that this person comes to the norm, right? So this is our approach to interventions in cases of neurodevelopmental conditions as well. So here what happens is when we look at it from that perspective, we see a subset of people who do not meet those normative expectations. And what I usually say is the only difference between neurotypical and neurodivergent people is that the neurodivergent people don't know how to pretend. And we all do, right? So if we were to sit in a classroom, now I don't see you, so I don't even know what you guys are doing. But even if you were in a classroom, in a physical classroom where you are listening to my lecture, I can guarantee that you will all be looking at me. You will all be nodding your head, and you will make sure that I feel like I am being heard. Even though I know for a fact that your brain must be wandering somewhere else. You might be thinking about, I don't know, did I switch off the gas before I left house today? Or, what am I going to cook for tonight? Or, I don't know, I have to get to this meeting tomorrow morning. I mean, you might be thinking of 101 things, but you will still pretend by doing all the gestures that are normatively appropriate in a classroom to make sure that I feel that, you're all listening. This, a lot of our neurodivergent kids are not able to do. They feel a certain way, they'll act they'll act that way. They will not pretend like it is something else. But we are good at doing it. So to me, what we see in most of the work that I have done with children, and the children that I've supported with, or the concerns that come to us for support, this is what I gather from there, right? Where a lot of children are struggling, because I have families who would come to me, especially when children are in their teenage years and, have difficulties with, sexuality and related concerns. And some families think they're horrified that their children are, sexual perverts maybe. And I have to tell them that your children are not sexual perverts. It's just that they're going through the same kind of development everybody else is going through. But a neurotypical child would know where to show it and where not to show it. But your neurodivergent child may have a little difficulty with that. That is the only difference. So this is where I'm saying, they don't know how to pretend. They don't know if they're feeling a way, they probably, act that way. So this is one difference that we see, which is probably, differentiating that neurotypical from the neurodivergent, according to me. Now, what is this neurodiversity concept, right? So as I told you earlier, we have been going with the medical model of looking at these neurodevelopmental conditions and trying to fix a lot of things, right? When we say that, okay, this person is not normal, let's try and make him normal, right? If a person is not looking into the eyes, if a person is not giving eye contact, uh, our first goal for that person is to develop eye contact for that person. So similarly, we do a lot of different things like that. But as we are doing this, one thing that we did not realize is that we are actually going against their natural trajectory of development. And what is coming naturally from them is being curbed, and we are asking them to behave a certain way, which is different from what comes naturally out from them. Now, what we have seen over the years is that this approach is turning out to be rather traumatic to these people. And we know that now because we have a lot of adults now who have grown up with a diagnosis of autism or ADHD or any other neurodevelopmental condition. And they have also probably gone through therapies, right? A lot of stringent behavioristic therapies, probably, um, where there is a lot of training that happens to make them look a certain way. And that is when, I think Joshua used the word masking. We see a lot of masking that happens. People tend to pretend to be someone they're not. And what happens is, we also mask. We also mask in a lot of situations, right? We try to be somebody else that we are not, and when situations demand it. But for these children and adults, the masking is a lifelong thing. It is perpetual, right? They have to do it outside, they have to do it at home, they have to do it throughout, like 24/7 they have to be masking. And this takes a toll on them. And we see that a lot of the adults who have grown up with therapies, or who've grown up masking a lot of their natural characteristics, are um, are being diagnosed with, say, PTSD, post traumatic stress disorder. Some of them with complex pre-PTSD because of the chronic exposure to trauma that they have faced. So this brings us to think about what is it that we are actually doing here, right? Now, just like we talk about do no harm, like even if you're not helping them, at least try not to do harm. But what we're realizing is some of the work that we've been doing were actually harmful, right? It's not just not helpful, but it could have been harmful also to these people. So neurodiversity is more of a movement of acceptance, right? Where they're trying to switch from this medical model of looking at neurodevelopmental conditions and talking about, hey, this is how we are. So can you please accept us as we are? And now a lot of the therapeutic approaches, a lot of the research, all that is moving towards in that direction. And we'll talk a little bit about all that. We talk about neuroaffirmative practices. Neuroaffirmative practices are any kind of intervention practices or any kind of approaches that we use that are accepting of neurodiversity, right? So now, when there is a child who's not looking into your eyes, who's not giving eye contact, we say, it's all right if you don't want to look into my eyes, but let me figure out a way to teach you without the eye contact. So now that is the path that we are trying to take so that we are respectful of their neurodiversity. Now, this is analogy that I like to share. This is borrowed from a friend of mine, and I thought this is like very powerful analogy, especially when we talk about neurodiversity in the classroom. Let's come to classroom. We will from the society as a whole. Let's take this microcosm and let's go to a classroom. Think about a garden, and you have all sorts of plants in that garden. And say you are a person who enjoys gardening and you love your garden, and you're taking care of this garden. So there are trees in there, and you find all sorts of plants, that whatever exotic plants or whatever plants that you see everywhere, you bring them and you plant them in your garden. So you have a variety of species in there. And you have trees, you have shrubs, you have flowering plants, you have plants that bear fruits. So some plants flower, some plants don't, some plants bear fruits, some plants don't. You have creepers, that just go about in an unruly fashion. So you get the gist, right? You have all these different kinds of plants. You also have tropical plants. You have succulents. Now tell me, do you provide the same kind of care for all these plants? Would you say that
For,
this is
for
how much?
succulents, yeah,
Yes,
for
please.
succulent
Go ahead.
plants, maybe we'll be taking care more because it is very sensitive. But the other plants and all, maybe it
I thought
depends
succulent
upon
plants are
the.
more hardy. They're more hardy. Maybe they're more sensitive when it comes to a tropical climate like ours, probably, because they don't need as
Yeah.
much water, right? So one day,
Yes,
as a
Yeah.
gardener, I'm deciding today I'm going to give everybody, or in my garden, I'll give the same amount of water to everyone every day. I don't care you want it or not. I don't care if it's harmful for you or not. I'm going to give the same amount of water to everyone in my garden. Would you do that? Would you ask your money plant, which is a creeper, why are you running around all over the place like this? Why can't you just be like the tree? Why can't you just stay in one place? Would you ask that question? Not only would you not ask that question, you would also do things that are helpful for the development of each plant. You might plant this creeper right next to a tree, or you might plant this creeper right next to a place where the creeper can take some support and, grow. You will make sure that the succulents are not watered every day, but the tropical plants gets a lot of water. You will make sure the kind of care that is needed for each of them is given differently. Why is it that we do this for our plants and not for our kids? When we go into a classroom, say we have 40 kids in the classroom, we expect all 40 of them to respond the same way. And we tell them we'll only give you the same amount of water, which is going to be a lecture-based form of instruction. And you will all write the same exam paper, which is how, you will show me how much you've grown. When some of them are, like money plants, creepers, they want to run around. Some of them are trees, they're just sitting there and listening to you, whatever you're saying. We do it for our plants, but we refuse to do it for our children. Now, this is the biggest problem that is coming in the way when we are trying to do inclusion in schools. Because neurodiversity, by the virtue of being diverse, brings us a lot of children who are cognitively wired differently. But our expectations don't change. Our expectations are the same for all these children. And that is where our inclusion system is breaking down. So before we move on, here is a fancy definition, because when we have a word, we need a definition. And it's pretty fancy because it's coming from Harvard nonetheless. So let's see. I think we have covered a lot of you. Whatever you have said has covered many aspects of this definition, if you notice. It describes the idea that people experience and interact with the world differently. Everybody does that in their own different ways. It also says that there's no one right way of doing it. Now, what is happening in our schools? We insist on one right way of doing schooling, which is being seated in your seat for 40 to 45 minutes at a stretch, looking at the teacher, nodding your head, copying down whatever is written down on the board. These are all behaviors expected of all the children in the classroom, right? So there's only one right way of doing it. If one child decides that I don't want to write notes, can I take pictures of what is written on the board? We don't allow that, right? Because maybe we don't even allow phones in the school. So we have a lot of these do's and don'ts, and we know this one right way of doing it, and that's the only way we'll do things. When we do it that way, it is difficult for inclusion to happen. The third important aspect I want you to take away from this is these are just differences. These are not deficits. When we look at it from a medical model, we always see deficits. We see that somebody is not doing something, somebody is not doing it like the other person, because we're always comparing it to a norm. And what we fail to realize is that some of these children, when they are not doing certain things, they may be doing other things really well, which is not something that is expected in the classroom. Hence, we ignore those skills or those abilities. And that is what ends up happening to most of our neurodivergent children who are in school. And they get frustrated because of that. So I want you to think of these three different aspects of this definition. One is how you are different, how that doesn't mean what you're doing is wrong. And it also doesn't mean that you're any less than anybody else. Right? So this is what I want to talk to you about neurodiversity. Now that we understand neurodiversity, this is a this is a visual. It's like it's an infographic that has probably come on Instagram, I think, which is developed by someone with a lived experience. So this person is a neurodivergent person themselves, and I like this framework because when I train my my teachers in my organization, it is important for them to understand what neuroaffirming practices or neurodiversity affirming practices are, because in our organization we only use neuroaffirming practices. Anything that is not respectful of the child or the child's neurodiversity, we will not use it. So that's a philosophy that our organization follows. So she has this framework which tells you what does neuroaffirming practices look like, right? What are the different aspects that you need to focus on when you're engaging in neuroaffirmative practices. Now, today I will not be going through all of it, but what I've done is I have picked a few of these, and I'll be talking about that today. And that should open up a lot of discussions, and we can have a discussion around that at the end of the session. So I'll be talking about 4 different aspects of neuroaffirming practices today. And the first one is communication. In our culture, speaking to communicate is an extremely important expectation. In fact, in a lot of cases, we are able to identify children at an early age only because these children don't talk early enough. That is the red flag most families come to us with. And that is because we put a lot of emphasis on talking, because talking is so important in our culture, because if you're not talking, then that means there's something wrong, right? But what happens when we are insisting on just speaking as a form of communication is that we forget to respect other forms of communication. We see that neurodivergent people don't necessarily communicate through speaking, or may not find it easy enough or comfortable enough to communicate through speaking. What we have seen is when they're given an alternative form of communication, which could be a picture-based communication system or typing or writing even, we see that they're able to tell us more than when they would use speech to communicate. So why is it that we tend to ignore that aspect of their communication and just emphasize speech? So this is one of the issues that we see in a lot of families and a lot of schools, is that there is this undue emphasis on speech or speaking to communicate. So we do a lot of speech therapy, and there are a lot of speech therapists who also don't talk to the families necessarily about alternative forms of communication, and they focus on speech only, which I think is a disservice to the child, because a lot of children may not pick up on speech, or even if they did pick up on speech, they are what we call unreliable speakers. That is, they can't use speech all the time to make sure that they've communicated effectively. So it is important for us to explore other options of communication, because that is how we will get to know how much this child has learned. What we see is that a lot of children who we've been emphasizing just speech for communication, and they've not been given any other options to communicate, they grow up, and around say 12, 13 years of age, we realize let's try something else, and we offer another form of communication, and these children start communicating. We realize that these children knew a lot of stuff which we were not aware of, right? Just because they were not saying it, they were not speaking to communicate, we did not know how much they were learning from their environment. how much knowledge they had. But once they start using alternative form of communication is when we realized, oh my goodness, they've known so much all this while. And we've been thinking that they don't know enough, and we have been doing, like, very childlike activities with them, thinking that they're not comprehending some of the advanced concepts. So communication is very important for a lot of different reasons. uh, I have families, when they come to me, first thing I ask about is the child's communication. So it may be a 10-year-old, 11-year-old, they'll say, oh, he communicates. And I would ask them, how does he communicate? And it's probably just one word or short phrases to, tell the family that they want something. So just need-based communication. Well, that's good if your child were 3 years old. 11-year-old has so much more to communicate. How are we going to know what are this person's thoughts? What is it that they want to express about themselves, or about their opinions, or about their knowledge about the world? How are they going to express that, right, when they only have this one word, or a small phrase of communication? We also see that when children grow up and get into the adolescence, when puberty hits, we know, even for typical children, how much of chaos puberty can bring into their lives, right? Into their bodies, into their lives, into the family's lives. Now, on top of it, imagine not having a mode of communication, a reliable mode of communication to even tell you what is going on inside. And at that time, we see a lot of behavioral difficulties returning. Some children who had behavior difficulties, at an early stage in life, but it had kind of receded in their school years and they were doing well. But we see during adolescence, some of them are experiencing some uptick in those behavioral difficulties. And we're thinking this could also be because of communication, challenges that they're having. So it is very important for us to have an alternative form of communication. You can continue to have speech therapy. You can continue to encourage the child to speak, but have an alternate form of communication always. Now, when it comes to schools, we work with a lot of schools. From our organization, we are collaborating with a lot of schools, and we support children in these schools by providing a support teacher or a shadow teacher. And we've had schools that have told us we cannot have them come bring an AAC device to the school. Why? Because they have a policy against technology in school. How ridiculous is that? You're telling a child, do not bring your voice to school. That is what you're telling a child, because we have a policy against that particular voice you're using to communicate. So what I'm talking about here is challenges to inclusion, right? When there is one right way of doing things, sometimes we don't know who we are excluding because of that one policy. So that's about communication. As I told you earlier, as I've mentioned here, to me, talking is not necessarily communication, because there may be children who talk a lot, but they don't communicate through speech. And communication is not always talking. So it is important for us to understand the distinction between talking and communication. So sometimes when I ask families, is the child communicating? They'll tell me all about the speech that they have. But despite all the speech that they have, the child may not be communicating effectively. So distinguishing between talking and communicating is extremely important. Adapting systems and environments, or reframing expectations. So one of the other things that we do is, when we have a child with a disability or a neurodivergent child, what are the typical things that we do with the child? So typically a child goes to a lot of different types of therapies. What happens at these therapies? Again, going by the medical model, we always find that this child is deviating from the normative expectation. So let's work on it and let's try and bring it back to the norm. Now, what happens there is, we're working only on the child. And we are working on the child's area of weakness, not the child's area of strength. And what happens then, when we keep on saying this, when we keep on working on these child's area of difficulty or weakness, we are telling the child that you're not good at certain things. This is the messaging that we are unintentionally, unconsciously giving the child through our behaviors that we engage in through our therapy sessions, right? So all the focus is on the child. It is about making the child speak. It is about making the child look into the eyes. It is about making the child socialize through social skills training. I mean, all the effort is on the child to change the child. But on the other hand, if we were to switch it and make a little bit more changes in the environment of the child so that it becomes a little bit more easier for the child to live with his or her neurodivergence, that is a neuroaffirmative way of approaching. So what does that mean? Now we have children, when I go into classrooms to consult, some of the teachers, or I even hear this from parents. Parents tell me that, he at home, he does really well. When we are preparing for exams, he will tell me all the answers when I quiz him before an exam. But when his paper comes back, he has failed, or he has, just passed. So why is it that, he's not getting the marks? Because I know he's doing really well. When he's giving me the answers, he knows all the answers. So what is happening there? Most of these children, especially children with ADHD, we see, are able to understand concepts, are able to voice it in their own words, and they're able to orally tell you the answer. The moment you ask them to write, that is not a favored activity. I'm not particularly interested in writing. So what do? I have so much to write. I know this entire answer, but I can't write so much. I'll just write one sentence and leave it at that. So your mark will come only for that one sentence, no? So invariably, you will end up failing the exam. So what I ask teachers when I go into classrooms is that, what are you trying to assess here? As a science teacher, are you assessing this child's knowledge of science, or are you assessing his ability to write? We are trying to assess the knowledge of science, but we are doing it through writing. That is the problem. So what I tell them is, you will have to remove that factor. You will have to remove the factor of writing from this and assess him orally. When you assess him orally, you will get to know how much this child actually knows. You write down those answers, exactly what the child is saying. Don't write anything more. You just verbatim write down the answers that the child is saying, and you score those answers. And now you will see that this child is probably doing better than everybody else in class. This child who was failing is doing better than everybody else in class. So are we being fair to this child? When this child is really smart and we are just assessing his ability to write and failing him in the exam. Now, there may be places where you have to assess his writing. Like if you're doing a language, you will have your listening, speaking, reading, writing skills, right? There you assess the writing. It's fine, because then that is the only place where he's going to lose marks. Everywhere else, he's able to show his learning, express his learning through a way that is comfortable for him. So this is a adaptation of the system. Every child doesn't get that accommodation. It is afforded to this one child because of his need. So that's what we mean by adapting systems and environments. If there is a child who does not want to sit in the class for 45 minutes, give breaks. Let him take breaks, go out and come back. Maybe there are other children who are able to sit for 45 minutes. They don't need the break, but this guy needs it. So let him take it and come back. So what are we doing there? We're changing the child's environment, not the child. We're not asking the child to just suck it up and sit down for 45 minutes. We are not doing that. When your body craves movement, because some children, their brain needs to move to learn. That is also part of the cognitive diversity, the neurodiversity that we are talking about. Their brain has to move in order for it to learn. So if you ask that brain to sit down in one place for 45 minutes, that brain is just craving to move, and the brain is just shouting, why are we not moving? Why are we not moving? And the brain is not interested in listening to what the teacher is saying. So you've actually taken away the focus from the teacher by asking the child to sit down. On the other hand, when the child is moving around, the child is a better listener and the child is absorbing a lot more information in the class. In some cases, some children with autism, especially, we use visual schedules because sometimes, giving them instructions verbally is not helping them. They might not be processing it fast enough. Or they may not be able to respond to it quickly enough. So we give them visual schedules, or instructions are presented to them visually so that it's a little bit more easy for them. So these are some examples of adaptations that we make in an environment for the child. Even bringing in a shadow teacher or a teacher aide to the class to support the child is also an example of adapting systems and environments. So here, as I said, we are not trying to change the child. We're changing the environment to make it a little bit more conducive for the child to survive there. Third one. So as I told you, when we keep on doing therapy and we keep on correcting things that the child is not doing very well, the narrative unconsciously that we are giving them is, you're not good at this. So let's work on it. You're still not good at it. Let's continue to work on it. A lot of children who have behavioral regulation difficulties, emotional and behavior regulation difficulties, tend to get a lot of negative feedback from around them. I know of families who have come to me and told me that, they've stopped going to, especially mothers, they have stopped going to family functions anymore because the child is not able to regulate his behavior, and everybody in the family starts talking about it, starts scolding him, starts judging the mother, saying that you're not parenting the child, uh, well enough, and that's the reason why the child is behaving a certain way. So to avoid all this, the family has stopped going to any family functions. So these children who have difficulties with emotional and behavior regulation, they tend to get negative feedback wherever they go. At home, at school, within extended families, in the community, in the playground. So they seem to get these negative feedback only. It is very difficult to find an opportunity to give them positive feedback because sometimes we feel like they're not even giving us a chance to give them positive feedback. So where are they getting? What is it doing to doing? What is all this negative feedback doing to their self-identity? Right? We all know how important how we see ourselves is in anything that we do. Right? Self-identity, that self-worth is what makes us do whatever it is that we do well. At our workplace, at home, in parenting, whatever it is that we do, we need to know that we are doing it well, and we should have that, positive self-identity and self-worth for us to be doing these jobs well. So how do you expect a child who has this negative self-identity to be able to perform well in any setting? So it is important for us to, as I said earlier, adapt those systems, reframe some expectations so that we are not giving the same expectations to this child, right? We are telling them it's okay if you don't sit for 45 minutes. It's okay if you don't write all the notes. You can just write part of it. It is okay if you're not reading. We can use some, software that will do text to speech for you. So it's okay if you don't have certain of these skills. Let's try and accommodate for those skills. It is also important to capitalize on the child's strengths. How often are we looking at what the child is able to do? How often are we giving them opportunities to do a little bit more on that? We rarely do that because we are so focused on what the child is not doing and how do we make them do these things and how do we bridge those gaps so that he can continue to go to the mainstream school, or he can continue to be promoted to the next class, or he can finish his 10th exam. So these are our worries. So because of these worries, we constantly work on the gaps that are there, the learning gaps that are there, and not pay attention to what the child is really good at doing. Sometimes what we also do is some of these behaviors that naturally come from the child, like say, for example, a self-stimulatory behavior. There are children who may flap when they feel, when they need to be regulated, they might flap their hands to regulate themselves. There are children who move their body, they rock to regulate themselves. There are children with other, very specific kind of special behaviors that they engage in to help themselves, help their body, their brain cope with some of the stressors that are coming their way. what happens is, because some of these behaviors are not appropriate in our eyes, we insist that the child stop engaging in those behaviors, because that behaviors is making him stand out in the community, and we don't want that, right? So we are asking the child not to do those behaviors. Now, we see when, like when I have some of my teacher aides who go and sit with the children in the classroom, some of them will come back and tell me that, the child says, the child probably stimmed a little bit, and then he would immediately stop and he'll say, Aditya is a good boy. Aditya is a good boy. Aditya is a good boy. So, what is the child trying to communicate there? There is probably a narrative that has been established that if you stim, you're not a good boy. Bad boy stim. So what happens is, now when I feel like stimming, and when stimming is the word for self-stimulatory behaviors, in case you're not aware, when I feel like swimming, it's almost like, when you want to sneeze. When you want to sneeze and try holding your sneeze back, like, what will happen, right? You know how difficult it would be inside your body. And this is something similar, because your brain wants you to do this so that it helps them regulate in some way. And we are asking them to not do it from outside. And we are also shaming them about it. And they're also starting to question their body, their brain, why is it coming? Maybe I'm a bad boy. That's why it's coming. So these kinds of narratives, these kinds of messaging, these unconscious messaging that we send to our children can contribute to this negative self-identity. So we need to work on those things. So in a classroom, what I usually tell families is, when a child is included, when a neurodivergent child is included in a regular classroom, we need to be clear about what is it that we have in mind. What is it? What is our goal? My goal clearly for a child going to school is so that he is in an environment where his peers are. He has all the right to be in that environment, because at that age, that is where all the children are. They're not sitting at home, they're all going to school. And just because of that, this child should also be there around people who are his age and do things that his peers at that age are doing. This is the only reason why I want them there. Now, what happens is, when we put a child in a mainstream school, the focus inevitably goes into academics. And the school, the parents, everybody starts focusing on what is the next test, what is the next exam, how much portion to be covered, how much does this child know, why is he not learning, why is there so much learning gap. This becomes the focus. But that is not even the focus we are looking for when we are sending the child to school. So I tell parents, the only reason why we are sending them to school is for the social purposes. Any academic kind of enrichment, any academic learning will happen at home, even if it doesn't happen at school, because sometimes it may happen at school, but if it doesn't happen at school, it can definitely happen at home. Now, don't think that your child's developmental profile is very different from a typically developing child's. So your child may do certain things, much better than everybody else in the class, and your child may not do certain things as well as everybody else in the class. There will be ups and downs in their developmental profile. So just because your child does not pass the 7th grade science exam doesn't mean anything about his academic skills. He might be able to understand science, he might be able to give you even more advanced concepts than 7th grade science, but he just did not know how to answer the question paper the way it was expected to be answered. That's all. That is all that is. So let's not put too much emphasis on these exams or, promotions and all these other normative expectations that come from a school, but instead focus on the socialization, support the child's regulation difficulties if there is any way you can do that. And we will just make sure that the child is happy to go to this place and come back. That's all we want from a school environment. So when we put this undue emphasis on academic performance and academic achievement, we are likely to contribute to this negative self-identity, is what I'm trying to say. And the last one is respecting the child's autonomy and helping the child advocate for themselves. So what we see is most of the time when we are providing care for a neurodivergent child or a disabled child, we tend to think that they can't do it on their own. A lot of things we do it for them. A lot of decisions we take for them. We don't necessarily ask them if they are okay with that decision. But all these decisions are done, they're made for them. So this is something else that we need to stop and reconsider. We sometimes the children are able to communicate it to us. Sometimes they're not able to communicate it to us. We should do all this, investigation and detective games to figure out what is going on. I've seen children, or even though I'm all about inclusion and I want all children, to go to a regular school and not even have special schools in place. Despite having that firm belief in inclusion, I have seen children who have resisted inclusion. They don't want to be in an inclusive setting. They're happier in a special school, or they're happier not going to school. I've worked with children like that also. Now, at that point, they're not able to tell us that, they don't want to do this, but sometimes it is communicated through their behaviors. But we need to be listening to those behaviors. We need to be listening to understand what is it that they're trying to communicate to us. Most of the time, as families or as educators, we impose our expectations on them, and we are not necessarily asking them if that is what they want to do. So it's important for us to check in with them, find out if that is something that they want to do, give them choices, at from a very early age, give them choices, let them choose, let them say what is it that they like to do. um, Include them in decisions that is being made for them. So these are all ways in which we can respect their autonomy, and also raise them to be people who will grow up and speak for themselves. So even at a young age, I keep telling families, teachers, and shadow teachers to have the child go and advocate for themselves. Don't go and ask for the child. If the child wants something, let them go and ask for it. So we encourage them, we give them the skills to do that, have them go and talk to the teacher, tell the teacher, this is what I want. It could be through speech, it could be through an AAC device, whatever it is. You start advocating for them, start encouraging them to advocate for themselves from a very early age. And one thing you have to remember is, if a child can do it, a child will definitely do it. If a child can do it, there is no reason why a child will not do it. If the child is not doing a skill, that is because the child has not gotten to a point where the child is ready to do that skill. So no matter how much we force it on them, how much we, do any kind of reinforcement or punishment or whatever methods that you use to make them do it, it might not happen. So there, you are not respecting their autonomy by forcing a behavior on them. Instead, if we can just give that child some time, try it again later, and see if the child is ready for it, the child will start doing it. So just because you have certain goals in your IEP, which the parents or the teachers or other adults in the child's life have chosen, put it there. Just because you have put those goals doesn't mean that the child should achieve those goals, because the child may not be ready physically to reach those goals yet. So we might have to give them some time to get there. Also, letting the child do things on their own, as in, we talk about presuming competence. That is one of the core principles that we follow. We tell teachers also, parents also, to follow. No matter what your child is doing or not doing, believe that your child is competent inside. He is learning a lot of stuff. It's just that we still don't know how much he's learning. He knows a lot of stuff, and he's capable of doing a lot more stuff than what he's actually doing. So this belief has to be there in any caregiver, any teacher who's working with these children. And that is the only way we can respect them. We can give them opportunities to make choices about their learning. And also we can promote self-advocacy only through that way. Now, in all these four areas that we talked about, technology can play a very important role also. As I said, in communication, we can have alternative and augmentative communication devices, where it might be an app that you can install on your phone that the person can use to communicate. It could be a laptop with a word processor in it that the person can use to type to communicate. It could be maybe they are writing somewhere instead of just typing. It could be writing. It could be writing with a stylus, probably on a tablet. These are all technology options that you can consider for a child who's struggling to communicate. Similarly, when we are adapting systems and environments, there are a lot of different tools that are available in the market right now that can support our children, that can accommodate for some of the difficulties that they are having. We have spell checkers for children with learning disabilities or dyslexia. We have speech to text options for children who have difficulty writing and expressing. We have read aloud options for children who may have difficulty reading. So these are all tools that we can use to support them, use it in their favor. We've also seen during the COVID time, we realized how important some of these, meeting platforms like Zoom and Google Meet, etc., are, because a lot of our children who grow up to be young adults, who are young adults right now, are finding it very convenient when they are at their home and they're able to interact with other people, because they have high social anxiety, because of which they are not able to venture out to the public, to community spaces and interact with people. But on the other hand, in Zoom, you don't feel that anxiety because you are in the comforts of your own home, own space. But you get to interact, you get to share your thoughts through typing. Sometimes you don't even have to speak there. You can just use the chat facility and express yourself. So we see a lot of children and a lot of young adults, a lot of adults who are using these options a lot more. Social media is also a great tool for them. We see a lot more children and young adults who are very creative, who have a way with their words, who are coming out with, poetry, um, novels, stories, and publishing it on social media. So we get to see a lot more talents being expressed also through the options that we have now. Now, what is the role of a shadow teacher or a support teacher in all this? So, what you realize now is our children, by virtue of being neurodivergent, their brains are different, their brains work differently, regulate differently, behave differently. So, when they are engaging in those behaviors or when they are having difficulties with regulation, they may need somebody else to support them. They may need somebody to co-regulate. They may need somebody to, help them by removing them from the situation, or they may need somebody to help them if they want to interact with the peer, through the because they don't have the necessary social skills to interact with a peer. So these are all things that a shadow support can offer. And we have about um, in our organization, we have about 200 plus shadow teachers right now working, which means they're serving that many children in different schools. And we see that these teachers operate in very different formats. For some, they need a lot of support and they're right next to them, for every single thing that the child is doing at school. But for some, these teachers are probably sitting behind in the classroom for, say, math is an easy subject for them, so they don't need any additional help. So the shadow teacher probably moves away from the child. But language is difficult for them, so that is when they'll come and sit with the child. So there are teachers who are engaging with the child in a lot of different ways, depending on how much the child needs it. So these teachers have also been helpful in ensuring that a neuroaffirmative approach is followed with these children in those environments. So basically, when you have your child growing at home and you as a parent or as a primary caregiver takes care of the child. So, if the child is jumping around, you tell them, don't jump around, you're going to get hurt. Or, when they're crossing the road, making sure they hold your hand, otherwise they're going to run away. So these are all measures that you're taking to make sure that your child is safe, given the child's brain development, given the child's regulation, development of regulation mechanisms. So these are the measures that you're taking, where you're always reminding them, or maybe giving them that additional support in areas where they don't have those skills yet. So this is pretty much what a shadow teacher will also do at home, because in some cases, some children continue to need that support. No matter how much you give therapy in an outside setting and teach them social skills or teach them regulation skills, it is not necessary that the child can use those skills in the real world. The reason why I'm saying that is, if the child could use those skills, the child would have already used it. So the training that is happening away from their natural environment doesn't necessarily translate to this environment, because now I'm in a classroom of 40 children with one teacher teaching all of us, and I don't even understand half the things this teacher is saying. I'm bored to death. I want to get up and walk around. Now I'm losing my regulation. You know, I'm not able to cope with this, so I go into a meltdown. On the other hand, in a therapy center where the social skills training or the emotional regulation or the behavior training is happening, you have only that one therapist and this child working. And that is like a very safe environment for the child, very comfortable environment for the child, and the child is able to make progress there. But the same strategies may not happen in the school, because there are a lot more other stressors in the school. So, a shadow support is able to help with these situations by supporting the child through all these stressors and helping the child cope with these stressors in a way that the child is capable of doing at that. So, as I said, if we are always thinking about changing the child, if we are always thinking about, bringing the child back to the normative expectation or to the normal, then we can't do inclusion. We will have to accept them the way they are and try and accommodate for their needs in the bigger picture, and hence work with inclusion. So, for that, we have to first accept the child. And neurodiversity is all about that. Neurodiversity is about acceptance. So, once we accept the child, then inclusion becomes easy. That's the end of my presentation. I'm open to take questions now.
So people can raise their hands, post in the chat box. Yes, Miss Anu. We can't hear you.
Me now?
Yes.
Yeah. My name is Anu and I'm from Bangalore. And I'm a teacher. I usually take one-to-one classes like tuitions. But I just wanted to know, in regular schools, there would be very borderline cases, right? As in kids who are not really identified as neurodivergent. How do we identify such students, and how can it be not mistaken as laziness? Mostly I feel, the things that you said would be referred to as, oh, he's just lazy to write, he's just lazy to read, or he is very irritant, he cannot sit in one place. And if it is a neurodivergent student, and very extreme case, you can identify it and he'll be treated that way. But if you are a borderline, what do we do about it? How do we identify it?
We've already identified it, Ms. Anu. As I told you, if a child can do it, a child will do it. And if the child is not doing something in your classroom, it is not because the child is lazy or because the child is just being difficult to make your life difficult. It is not. We may think all that. We may think the child is lazy, the child is manipulative. I mean, these are all the big ticket words that we use. Like, these are the popular ones, right? Lazy, manipulative, stupid, not motivated. These are all the labels that we put on them. But if a child is after concentrated, consistent effort, the child is still not doing something, then we need to look into it to understand what exactly is going on there. So I don't think teachers need to know the technicalities of how to identify somebody in class, I think you will know. Your gut will tell you. Any good teacher's gut will tell them that there is something off about this child. And you also get to know that. So what we usually ask teachers to do is, if you find these difficulties, you can go back and ask to the previous teacher, from previous year, did you also see these similar difficulties, or is it something new that has come up? So you can see that there has been a pattern over the years, and this child has been getting, maybe the child has not gotten intervention. So sometimes what happens is, maybe all you need to do is sit one on one with that child, give them some extra additional attention, additional, push, or explain it to the child in a different way, teach them in a different way, and the child will just get it, right? So we call it response to intervention. So even before we think about sending them for assessment, or for any kind of evaluation, we look at different strategies work, tried with the child, and if it is working with the child. Because as I told you earlier, not all 40 children in the class learn the same way. In fact, not two children in the class learn the same way. But we just assume that everybody is learning the same way and we teach the same way. So children who are struggling a lot, they are the ones who get left behind. And if we don't take that effort to go and work with them one on one, find out where the breakdown is happening and try and bridge those gaps, we will lose them because they'll be far behind. The gap will just widen. But if we can try out some of these strategies and see if it is working for this child, then you're done. Then you're good to go, right? The child may just need that little bit of a support, and the child might go ahead and bridge that gap. But despite doing a lot of different interventions and still the child is not showing progress, then we can have a conversation with the family. Refer them for assessments, or those kinds of things can be done. But if the child is not doing it, please sit with him or her and see what's going on. Right? We don't even have to label them. We don't even have to think anything else. But if the child is not doing, immediately assume there is something going on that we need to look into. That much as teachers, I would like for everybody.
So, Miss Meghna Naidu, do you want to ask your query?
Yes, hi. Hi, Dr. Bindya. I wanted to ask for your opinion about transitioning out of a certain class that my son is in. So since we homeschool, he is engaged with a lot of different activities through the week, and we do see that some learning environments sort of very natural. There's a very natural stopping point to it, where either the facilitator is not able to engage the child appropriately anymore, or he's just outgrown those classes. And I've always had this dilemma, whether I should allow for like a few overlap classes for my son to sort of understand that, okay, this learning environment will be sort of transitioned out in a few weeks, and specifically in spaces where me as a parent, I'm noticing that the learning environment is not working for him, but he is still committed and is wanting to show up, because maybe because he thinks that he's supposed to show up because we've signed up for these classes. Yeah.
And your question is, Meghna?
Um, yeah, I guess I started it from the opposite side. So to put it more succinctly, there is a situation where I feel that the learning environment is no longer appropriate for my son, and as a parent, I want to transition out of that space. But he is still like sort of showing some interest in engaging with this facilitator, and he's looking forward to it, maybe because it's been a part of his routine for a few months. So the knee-jerk reaction for the parent in me is to be like, it's not working, let's stop it like now. But I feel that there needs to be some closure, and I'm not able to arrive at how I can offer that, because the facilitator is not quite open to making any more changes beyond what they've made already.
What does your child think in all this?
I'm sorry, I missed that
What
word.
does your child think about all this? Have you had a conversation with your
It's
child about this?
interesting because I feel that he is able to take it in his stride more. And he's like, okay, some classes just are not the best, and that's okay, I'll cope with it. But I feel like this is not just a like a one-off incident, it's becoming more of a pattern. And I had asked this question in a previous live as well. I feel like this particular learning environment is reinforcing a negative loop that I am not good at remembering things, and I will forget information even if it is told to me in a particular way. So that, along with other concerns, is why I want to pause these classes. But I
You
don't
said
quite
you've
know how
had a
to.
you've
Mhm.
had a conversation with your child, or you're just interpreting it from your child's
It's
behavior.
my observation,
So what I
but
would like to do
also
is I
Mhm.
would like for you to have this conversation with him
I
and find
have.
out. Yeah, so that was my question. If you've had that
Okay.
conversation and that
I
is what
have,
you have
and
said.
he is not one to share a lot. So he mostly is like, it's okay, I'll just continue it.
But I think if he says that, maybe we will have to just give it another shot.
Mm.
And that way
I
you're
feel
respecting
that.
his
So
respecting his
what do
autonomy.
I do as a parent if my something that I am observing in class is probably like a little more than just this negative reinforcement. There have been a couple of other concerns that I have that I don't want to share on a public forum at the moment. But I feel that these classes have reached their, like, the end of the journey. And my struggle specifically is not how to talk to my son about it, but because these were one of the first classes that he was looking forward to in his routine. I don't want to take too much time if this
No,
is
it
like
is it
very
is not even
specific.
about, I understand it's not about your, it's not that you're struggling to talk to him
Yeah.
because knowing your son, I think he can have a conversation and be able to even express to whatever degree what he
Mm-hmm.
wants. Um I think he would be able to do that. And what
Yeah.
I'm trying to say is we might want to respect that.
Mm.
If it's a no or a yes, the whole idea that you have respected his opinion would
Yeah.
go a longer way, right? Maybe
Yeah.
you don't like these classes anymore, and maybe you want to discontinue them. But this is something that you can, probably keep watching, and you come
Mm-hmm.
back to have this conversation again later. Maybe when you have a lot more
Mm.
data, you come back and say, see, I know you didn't want to do it last time, we decided we'll go ahead, but I'm still concerned, I'm having these concerns, and you
Mm.
show him the data, right? So you have
Mm.
this continue to have this conversation. But what I'm saying is that respect for his autonomy, that respect for his yes or no is important.
Right.
And probably one more thing would be like just ask him and see what he likes about those classes.
Correct.
Is there other ways in which, what
Mm.
are the other alternatives? Has that been also given to him? I think that
That
is.
has been given, and what he likes about the classes is the predictability, which unfortunately the facilitator is not able to retain the predictability but work on the other feedback that has been given. And it is becoming, it's a devolving situation.
But then
Think.
despite the lack of predictability anymore, he's still
Mhm.
okay with it, right? He's going back to it.
Right.
So there must be something that is keeping him there. And as
Mm.
Miss Gauri said, it might be worth understanding what that is.
Okay. That's interesting. Thank you for that. It's yeah, I always appreciate your perspective because it points to things that I'm not necessarily looking at from a parent's perspective. So thank you.
So there are a few questions in the chat box. Let me start reading them out. So, how would you recommend dealing with multiple opposing sensory needs within one class environment?
I'm not sure if I understand that question. I saw it in the chat. Um,
So, we don't know if there's multiple people there having different
right, right.
sensory
So
issues.
I think, like an OT would be a better person to answer this question for you. But whatever the sensory challenges are, we will have to take those into consideration, right? Now, if the child is having discomfort in that space, we need to understand what the triggers are and we will have to accommodate for them. And if that means it is multiple triggers, which is, triggering multiple different sensory systems, we will have to address that. Because what is the most important thing is that for a child to learn, the environment that the child is in should be what we call psychologically safe. And when we say psychologically safe, it should be a physically safe environment, it should be a socially safe environment, it should be a emotionally safe environment, it should be a creatively safe environment. So all this should come together for the child to be able to learn effectively. So if there are sensory challenges that the child is, struggling with, then we must cater to those. Now, I don't know what the nature of the sensory challenges are, but we should also evaluate and see if the child is able to do it on his or her own, or if there's a need for an adult to help with it. That is also something you might want to evaluate.
So, this one is interesting, ma'am. If the child doesn't sit in an online session, what should we do about it?
Um, well, the teacher who's facilitating the online session should do something about it, not the child,
Correct.
because the child is, physiologically or neurologically not wired to sit for that long. And sometimes what we see is also that is also the reason why we say don't work on the child, work on the environment. Sometimes it is not the child. You ask families, some families come and tell me my child doesn't have attention span. And I ask them, do they play video games? Yes. For how long? That he can play for the whole day. I don't see a problem with attention span now. So what are you talking about? Right? No, for math, he's not. So sometimes it is not the attention itself, it is the activity. The activity decides how much attention the child will give to that activity. So it depends on what the online activity is. If the teacher is able to give him stimulating activities, he might just sit. But there's nothing you can do to make him sit. That's why I said the teacher can change the way things are delivered, how he's asked to, participate in the class. Maybe he doesn't have to sit. Maybe, he can take some work and go sit on the floor and do it and come back and show it to her or something like that. But it'll depend on the teacher, how she will, facilitate that class to make sure that his cognitive diversity is also included in that class.
So the next question is, how can we convey these to the parents? So I think
But this
what
is
you
from a
mentioned about,
professional, I'm sure.
yes, acceptance.
Yeah, it's a tough one. I don't think I have a like a, one size fits all answer for that. Each parent is different. Their experiences, their cultural backgrounds, a lot of things decide how fast they accept. And I also see that parents who are younger, as in younger meaning their child is younger, they just recently got a diagnosis. And I see parents also grow with their child as a parent, right? So as a child grows, the parent also understands more and more about what to expect and what not to expect and all that. So they also become a lot more mature. So a 15-year-old's parent may have already seen a lot of different things that the child can do, the child cannot do, and has come to terms with a lot of facts. But 5-year-old's or a 4-year-old's parent is probably not there yet. Now, I see this 15-year-old's parent, I see this 4-year-old's parent, but I can't expect this 4-year-old's parent to behave like the 15-year-old's parent, because their journey also helps them learn a lot. And they have to go through that journey. Only then they will also realize how much to accept. That acceptance comes with that, with the years and the experience that gets added on. So I think we have to give parents time. We definitely have to give them information, provide psychoeducation, but also give them time. Not everybody, are not everybody have the same kind of readiness for acceptance. So we have to respect that.
So again, that is also a kind of a cycle that they go through, and it is important to be there for them when
Yeah, correct, correct.
it is necessary. So I think bullying is a whole big topic, and again, the school and the structure needs to be kind of strong enough to help.
Yeah, yeah.
So the other question is, can we avoid informing the regular school teachers about the kid with ADHD? What is your suggestions?
That's a very, very interesting question. And I
Yes.
think it's also a hard one to answer. I have gone both ways with, depending on the family, the situation, the school, and all that. In some cases, I have said, let's be upfront about it and let's tell them. And in some cases, I'll be like, let him start going to school and let's see how the school is dealing with it. And this is not to hide it from the school. It is to see, because sometimes some needs, sometimes it could be that I have seen children who have, high movement needs at home, but they pull it together and they do well in school. I don't know how they manage to do it, but they do. They sit through school for the 6 hours, 7 hours, they come home and they just completely unwind. And then they have all their meltdowns, their behaviors, everything is at home, nothing is at school. So it could also be one of those. So we don't know. So I tell them, let them go to school and let them see what is happening. And sometimes, even if you're moving from one school to another, it could be a very different environment for the child. Maybe what if this new school is more accepting of the child? And that itself will take away those labels, right? So sometimes it is not the ADHD or ASD. It is about how accepting an environment is for the child. So I have seen these labels and the symptoms just vanish when the child is in an environment where he's appreciated, he's encouraged for his strengths, and the child just thrives. Nobody's seeing the ADHD there, nobody's seeing the autism there, because it depends on that environment where they are and the people in that environment, how they respond to this child's behavior. So what if this school is going to be one of those? Then if they end up seeing those difficulties, then we could probably address them. So I say it both ways. As I said, it's never one answer.
I think as parents, knowing your child and observing what is happening is important here, and then taking a call.
And advocating for your child.
Correct. So, Miss Mansa, you want to talk? You're on mute, Miss Mansa. Yes. No, mute again. You're on mute. We still can't hear you. Okay, so in the meantime,
I think you can hear me now.
yes,
Yeah, I
now we
can
can hear you. Please go ahead.
Yeah. So, thanks for this session, first of all. It's been, especially the example on the garden that you spoke about, ma'am, was really an eye opener for me. I've never thought of it that way. The reason I'm here today is I have a daughter who is 4 years and diagnosed to be on the spectrum about a year back. And we are taking her for all, the usual therapies like speech OT. So my question, ma'am, is though my daughter is still too young, I have no idea what I have to look for when I start looking for a school when she's maybe in the first standard.
because we know a lot of schools say they are inclusive, and the only thing I can think of, when I approach a school is, do you allow shadow teachers, and a few very basic things. But what is it that as parents we need to really look at before, I mean, when we are selecting schools for our children?
Again, that's a very, very broad question. And I'm not sure how to address it. So usually I tell parents, sometimes I tell parents, just go with your gut feeling. And sometimes that works too. When you go and you check out a school, some parents come and tell me, I didn't like that school. I said, then don't go with it. It's as simple as that. Sometimes that gut feeling is very important. Like you will know, okay, my child will fit in the school. It looks like a good place for my child. Coming to more scientific, more objective reasons, I say, one thing I ask parents to look out for is, what is the assessment process like? That will tell you, like, if they're going to put your child through the same stringent assessment process like everybody else does, then they don't know anything about this. That's why they're treating the child like that, right? But if it's a school that knows they do inclusion well, they will know that there is a different way of assessing this child or understanding this child, and maybe this assessment test is not going to be helpful. um Understanding what are their services like? Do they have a special educator? Do they have a counselor on board? What are their services like? Are the children, primarily in the regular classroom? Are they being pulled out? What other accommodations are being given? So talking to other people who are going there maybe will be helpful, especially families who have children with special needs who are accessing that school would be helpful. Um, but in most cases, you can't tell until your child starts going there. And that is also because, it could be the best, most inclusive school, but it might just not work out for your child. That is also there. So one thing I tell parents is that, usually we have this culture of, we put our children in LKG, we take them out in 12th grade, right? They continue in the same school. So maybe that is not the trajectory. Maybe not. Maybe it is, maybe it's not. So I say just keep your minds open, because there may be a chance that this year was good, next year may not be. Right? So then if you're not satisfied with that school anymore, look for another school. Don't think about, should I be changing schools so often? That is not even the, point of discussion. So just look at, where is your child happier? The child is, learning well. That is what we need. So go in with an open mind. Don't, if the school works out for 1 year, I'm happy. That's all.
Yes, ma'am. That's what I see most parents doing, a lot of trial and error, and they would have changed so many schools.
That's the only way.
Okay. So thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. So the next question is about, is there a list of schools in Bangalore that accept neurodiverse children?
We do have a list of schools. Let me see if I can send you the website. I'm not sure where exactly to find it, but I know, there was a time when we used to have on our website a list of schools, but now I think it's in a blog somewhere. But if you can just
So
search on
if
this
you
website.
can share it, I can share it with all the registered participants. If they are here,
So
they
I
have
put
given
the
their
I put the
email.
website here in chat.
Yes.
So that is the organization through which we give shadow support, and we also provide home care therapists through that. So they had a list of schools that we are currently working with, and we have had positive experience. But I'm not sure if that list is still there. But I can find out and maybe share it with Ms. Gauri.
I have a question. Some parents come in and say they, as mothers, are going in as shadow teachers to school.
Yeah.
So how do we thread this? Because
So
some may be kind of quite good and know and understand and know how to kind of help the child
Right.
regulate, but for some it may be a bad.
I'm not too sure about that model. Yeah, because because when a mother goes in, the mother's expectations are also going in. So there
Correct.
is no objectivity, and that might not work in the favor of the child. So that has been my biggest concern, right? So but I also understand that having a shadow, hiring a shadow is also, additional expense and a burden on families. So a lot of families resort to those measures. I've also seen schools where they, like they switch children, as in, a mother of one child will be the shadow teacher for another child. They do that also. But then again, at the end of the day, you need to understand how trained they are to do that work, right? Because it is not about the misconception is that a shadow support is somebody who just sits with the child and makes the child do things and basically takes instruction from the family, whatever the family wants to do, whatever the teacher wants to do in the class, the shadow just makes the child do. But that is not what it is. We have to understand where to draw the line. We have to understand, is this reasonable expectation for the child? Uh, you know, if it is not, then how do we adapt? How do we accommodate for it? All this has to happen, but it might not happen when it is mothers. I mean, I know
So,
of very
so
aware
because of
mothers.
other things they cannot afford, they want to do it. Can we kind of direct them to you so there is some form of training or support or guidance that
Yeah,
can happen?
that we can do. That we can do.
Okay. And again, some come asking for where to find the shadow teachers. I think we can refer them to
That
your
is the website.
institute.
Yeah.
Okay. So that is good. So I think we have covered all the questions here. So, on behalf of the Brainchild Trust and all the participants here, a big thank you for coming here, spending your time, sharing it with your experience. And the way you explained was kind of really nice. So, I think things to take back is being neuro-affirmative. So, brain has to move to learn. I think that is going to sit in my brain too. And thank you very much. And thank you everybody who's come here, and hope you've all had a good experience and taking back a lot from this session. So thank you everybody who's here.
Thank you, Ms. Gauri. Is
Thank
there a way you can share the chat only with me, because I've not had a chance to look through it?
you.
Uh,
Mhm.
I think there's somebody. Never
Mhm.
mind. And if somebody wants to reach out to me, please feel free to share my number. And, if they want to reach out, they can just reach out on my WhatsApp. And that would be the best way to reach me.
Let me check if there's any way, or if there are any resources, any links, I can share it. If you share it to Miss Apurva or myself, I can
Sure, sure.
share it to all the people who have registered.